Hello, and welcome to Gigging Out, a podcast about the people and businesses leading the gig economy. I'm Dana Gagnon, CMO at Every, and today's episode is with Bradley Hornby, co-founder of Homebound, a furniture-as-a-service marketplace. Bradley shares his founding story and how they quickly figured out that a revenue share model would make the business more scalable. He speaks about the key metrics they use to measure success, how they established a pricing strategy, and their best channels for driving demand. We end the discussion with how he thinks about the future roles he needs to hire for, his predictions for the circular economy, as well as a word of caution to early stage founders. I learned a ton from Bradley, and I know you will too. All right, wonderful. Bradley, thank you so much for joining me today on Gigging Out. I'm so excited to speak with you and to learn more about Homebound.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. So let's dive right on in. So Homebound is a furniture rental service. You call it furniture as a service. Can you talk me through the origin story? How did you come up with this idea?
Of course, yeah. So actually, a sort of in a roundabout way, I used to travel to the States an awful lot for work in my previous role. And whenever I used to come over, furniture rental was quite an established sort of business over in the US. And while I was working for that company, I met my co-founder. And just during COVID hit, we got together and we discussed a bunch of different ideas of what was working really well in other major cities, but hadn't quite taken off across London and Europe, for that matter, in any meaningful way. And furniture rental kept on coming up. So we tested a small MVP. We put our own money in. We tested the MVP, and it really shocked us, the results in the first 4 weeks. So we doubled down and built a business plan and raised some money last December. It's been quite an exciting journey since then.
Oh, that's amazing. Can you talk about some of the other ideas you had back then that you were kicking around?
Yeah, of course. So toy rental was another one that kept on coming up. Well, actually, so I guess a sort of a step beside that, it's more than just as a business idea as such. We wanted to do something that's actually good for the planet, right? So something circular, something sustainable, where we can try and actually commit, something good towards the planet, as opposed to just being a flat business idea. So the models we were looking at were all sustainability, circular economy, or something along those lines. So the other thing that kept on coming up was toy rental, and then any sort of baby rental, so pram rental, or anything like that. The problem is during COVID, toy rental for us just seemed like a very sticky idea because people were very conscious about hygiene and where's the toy come from. So anyway, we sort of parked that idea and went ahead with furniture rental, which in the US, there's sort of, many examples of it doing really well over there. But across Europe, it's all very corporate focused and nothing direct to consumer. And the problem you face is you have, I guess, a generation of people who, for one reason or another, home ownership is further to reach. So people rent longer than ever. And the problem is if you don't have a way to, acquire really nice furniture, you end up just buying really cheap things that end up in landfill in 12 or 8 months. So yeah, we decided to go ahead. So toy rental was one of it and pram rental was another. But I think we're both pleased that furniture rental was the one we went ahead with. I
mean, I could see totally a use case for toy rental too, right? Kids get so sick of their toys. They're never totally worn out.
So much of it just ends up in landfill, right? Because the thing is I know there's sites like eBay and stuff, but the problem is if you're not bound into it, if you lose, I don't know, one piece of Lego, it just ends up in the rubbish, right? So, and unless the thing is if you sort of buy into the circular side of it from the outset, then you're tied in a sort of way that just, I guess it helps that process of keeping it circular.
Yeah, no, for sure. So on the furniture rental side, what are the main use cases that you see people using a Homebound for? I would love to hear about that.
I must be honest, it's been quite a journey for us as well. So we originally thought there would be a lot of expats coming home, who were moving. And what we found, around 30% of our audience at the moment are just sort of your average 24 to 38-year-old who are renting long-term, who want a really nice sofa, but who are too nervous to actually go and spend, £2,000 or £3,000 on a sofa because they don't know if it'll fit in their next place, or if their next place is furnished. Because the problem you have in a lot of cities is 40% of them are furnished and then some aren't. So that was a big surprise for us. We were surprised at how many, and for lack of a better word, but your average sort of person, right, is actually really interested in renting. And then you have the usual suspects that we sort of predicted, which is home staging, a lot of people. And instead of going like the traditional sort of home staging company, a lot of people actually just want to come and pick their idea, right? Well, actually, I just want a bed, a sofa, and a dining table instead of all the, for lack of a better word again, fluff that goes with it. So it's been quite a good mix. The one thing that we're quite bullish on is how many of those, your average type sort of person, right, who are really keen to, I guess, find out where their furniture comes from. Is it sustainably made? How can I keep it circular? So, we're excited to see, I guess, where next year takes us.
Can you talk a bit about how you do source the furniture? Are you buying it from the manufacturers, or are you basically just a middleman that is facilitating the rental for the manufacturer? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so a really good question. The companies that we looked at in the US that we really did base a lot of our model around in terms of how we wanted it to look and feel in the UK, because the US models are really nicely built on that direct-to-consumer side. The problem is in the US, you can raise money a lot bigger and a lot quicker than what you can across Europe.
Yes, I've heard that from every founder in the UK. Yep.
So anyway, when we were putting the business plan together, and obviously I mentioned we used our own money to start out with, we quickly realized that unless we went and raised like a £2 or £3 million pre-seed round, we wouldn't have enough money to actually go and scale this in a way that would then lead us onto seed round. So we actually went back to the suppliers, and we've now built a revenue share model where we work directly with the suppliers. We don't have the huge costs up front, which is great because it makes the model a lot more scalable in terms of we don't have those huge upfront costs. And the nice thing is we work on them on a revenue share model until the point that they've received X percentage on their trade price, at which point we own the furniture. So we do take ownership in the long run, but initially we don't have those huge costs. So I think it's made it a lot more attractive. And I think we'll touch on it, but yeah, we've just closed the pre-seed round, and we will look to raise a much more significant seed round, probably around middle of next year. Because buying of the furniture, look, it obviously is a lot better on our margins long term. But in order to get there, we need to prove the model on something that's a little bit more scalable. So that's currently how it looks.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, did you have to do a lot of convincing when you were talking to these manufacturers? Were they like, rental? Why would I rent you this? Or was it a business model they were already considering doing but didn't know how to cross that threshold?
So two of them. So we currently only work with 3 suppliers. Firstly, because we're a small team and we want to keep things neatly in check. 2 of them were already considering the model. So it was something that they were looking into, but something that looked very sticky, I guess, from the outset. So they were quite happy to come in and trial and test it. And I'm pleased to say one of them is actually joined in on the pre-seed round. So they're clearly seeing the traction in it. One of the things with this whole rental model that we were a little uncertain of, and something that we've had to prove along the way, when the furniture goes out, a lot of it is brand new, and you'll see on our website we have a pre-loved tab. Now, all the items that come back, they sort of, in an as-new standard, go under pre-loved. So you get a 20% discount on what you would normally pay on the rentals. But our whole model is it only works and scales if people actually don't mind renting other items, right? Items that have gone out previously. And actually, pre-loved is by far our most highest visited page, and people spend the longest on it. 93% of the items we've had back go back out within 2 weeks. So that for us was a huge sort of sigh of relief, right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to end up sitting on there with, a huge big warehouse full of stuff that nobody wants to rent. So, you have to take baby steps, I guess, with all these things, but it's starting to prove concept on a much deeper level, which is great to see.
Yeah. So you mentioned warehouse. Are you holding on to the inventory, or do your supplying partners hang on to their furniture until someone rents it?
Yeah. So initially, when it's rented out from the first time, that's all down to the supplier right up until that delivery. But after that, when it sort of falls into I guess Homebound's remit, we make sure all the furniture's in good nick. We hang on to that storage, and then we redeliver that. The problem with doing it the other way, which we did look at, and keeping those items stored with the supplier, we then have to go in and almost rewrite their inventory stock list, right? Like, hey, look, you've got this back. It's just too messy. But what we do on the flip side of that is we do take a much bigger revenue share once those items go back out. So because we take on more of the costs, we take on more of the risk, we obviously, that then reflects in the revenue share model. So it still, I guess, sorts itself out in the long run.
What's like the average length of the rental period, and how I imagine like people aren't renting just one piece. Like it's probably pretty addictive to be like, oh wow, I can just get a side table too. Like, is there an average item quantity too?
We're sitting currently at around 13 months on average. So on the website, you got 3, 6, 12, and 18, give or take. The average is 13. And what we notice, a lot of people, for lack of a better word, again, dip their foot, in the water to see, look, what's the quality of the furniture? Am I going to like it? Does this company really work? Because, direct to consumer furniture rental across the UK and Europe is really not a big thing. So what we often find is somebody will come in and get like a side table and a coffee table. And then once we deliver it 2 weeks later, we'll get like a full flood of, the full order, which has got a sofa, bed, all the accessories. So the average sort of item list is around 9 items that people take, but it normally comes in tranches. I guess people want to see first. And the thing for us is, and I guess it sort of leads nicely into it, so there was 2 routes we could have taken from the beginning is, do we focus hard on quality? So i.e. make sure the manufacturers are using, solid wood, things that will actually last, or do we try and sort of cheapskate it and, increase our margins that looks a little bit better, potentially when you're raising funds, etc. But what we feel, and, we're really strong on this, is if we look after the quality now, those items will get rented out time and time again. And actually, in the long run, it'll make a lot more sense for us. It also means, from a consumer side, these people are getting it's really good quality stuff that, they're happy with. And then on the environmental front is, look, if we can keep these items in cycle 3, 4, 5 times, it makes a lot more sense than sort of going the other route. So yeah, we definitely stick to that quality end.
I love that. I imagine, well, at least in the US, the biggest gripe with furniture purchasing lately is supply chain. People have had to wait. Like I literally just talked to someone recently who had to wait, I think 22 months for a piece of furniture. It's insane. I imagine it was similar in the UK. I mean, how was that a boon to your business? Like the fact that you can deliver something in 2 weeks alone, I think would be such a sticky selling point.
It is. So we get a lot. We get a lot of customers who have gone on, they've moved house and they just thought that they'd be able to go online and buy a bed, right? And they'll get a bed in, 2-3 weeks time. We had a customer come to us and they tried a really big chain store across here. They were waiting 13 weeks for delivery, which is just, you can't wait 13 weeks for a bed, right? It just doesn't work. So we do get a lot of customers. The nice thing, the way that our feeds work directly into our suppliers is it's a consistently live update, right? So we double check that. I think it's every 2 hours. It runs a stock check on all of their sites. So if you come onto our site and it's available, it means it's definitely available and we can deliver it in 2 weeks. So we do manage to catch a lot, and fingers crossed, we keep those sort of limits up to date.
When you do own the delivery side for the furniture that you are holding in inventory, do you manage that in-house? Did you decide to outsource it? Would love to hear your thoughts on that piece.
Yeah, so we're managing it in-house at the moment. We have looked at outsourcing it. The problem is with outsourcing it, so the problem is because we sometimes use, so let's just say a customer comes online and orders, 2 beds directly from the supplier because they're brand new, and then, 2 coffee tables, let's just say, from us, and they're pre-loved. The problem is trying to explain to an outsourced person how this all structures together and what you're meant to do there. It's just too tricky. I think once we get to a certain size, it probably might make sense. But for the time being, we've got a nice little team. Everyone's fully on the same page. Although, I'm sure those pain points will become a little bit more pressing as we move into 2023.
So you mentioned size. Are you currently just in one geographic location? I assume London.
Yeah, so we're currently in London. We do supply London and Manchester, and we will open that up further into other cities. I guess the what doesn't make sense in furniture rental, and if one of our key pillars is sustainability, it doesn't make sense that we drive a coffee table from here to Scotland, let's just say, right? Because 10-hour round trip, it just doesn't make sense. So our vision for Homebound and the way that it would look, and especially as we look to scale it up across Europe, is we will build hubs in major cities, and those hubs would be item specific. So you're not going to order a coffee table that's in London to Manchester, right? You would be served the content that's available in Manchester. And again, it just makes sense, right? Because even from a costing perspective, right, it doesn't scale. So that's our plan. And the idea is we would build a sort of a technology based marketplace that could go into major cities and have suppliers plug in. And then you would have just a local Homebound hub that would be able to, service those orders.
You mentioned the technology side of things. Can you talk a little bit about the technology you built the platform on? Did you use something that was more of an out of box, solution? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, of course. And it's probably going to be a little bit disappointing, but at the moment, it's currently all built off Shopify.
Cool. No, that's great.
Yeah, so all built off Shopify. All of our links. The other co-founder is a little bit more technically gifted than I am. But on the backside of this is we are working with a third-party agency who's wireframing exactly what the marketplace would need to look like from a supplier point of view, from a consumer point of view, because we will want to build something from the ground up. The thing that we didn't want to do, and I did this an awful lot in my previous role, is we don't want to build something that we think consumers want or that we think suppliers want. We actually want to know exactly what we're trying to build before we go and build it. And I find that sometimes, especially with technology, you have a hunch that somebody will want to use something. You go and you build it and they never do. And it just sort of falls by the wayside. So we're trying to do things a little bit differently in that sense. But yeah, we will look to build something, completely bespoke early next year.
Very cool. So, what are some of those metrics that you look at to know you've hit product market fit and you can invest in a custom solution? Are there certain KPIs you're looking at?
Yeah, of course. So one of the cost per acquisition for us is hugely important. One of the boundaries that we've had up until this point is in the UK, you need to be at something called the FCA, it's Financial Conduct Authority. And effectively, if you rent anything longer than 3 months, you need to be financially regulated as a company. We didn't realize this when we first set out on this journey, which was obviously a delightful little spanner in the works that we had to sort of overcome for the last 5 months. Anyway, now that we have it, we need to make sure that the CAC's in line. We're on track at the moment to reach, it seems to be a magic word in terms of a lot of the VCs that we're chatting to, but around the $1 million ARR mark, probably in March next year. And if we continue at current trend with the CAC that we have, we feel that we'll be in a good place to really double down and actually spend the money on technology. I think alongside that, it's really important, what's our churn rate? How are we converting through emails? It's all of those smaller metrics that we're monitoring really closely, because I think on top line, it's great if you have a sort of a single CAC, but that CAC will change a lot. And the other metrics that you can affect is, how are you converting with the consumers you already have? How can you increase their basket size? So all of these smaller things we're keeping an eye on, but, it really is still early doors for us. So yeah, we'll need to work on that.
Can you speak to the customer acquisition side? You talked through the supplier. How are you acquiring customers? What's working?
Google Ads for us is working extremely well. If you think of furniture rental, right, people generally decide that they want to rent furniture and then they go on and if they see us. So that for us is converting the best, obviously. But we are slowly starting to see, and we've only just relaunched it recently, from the social side, right? The nice thing with furniture rental is it's a low cost entry, right? So if somebody's thinking about a new sofa, but it's going to cost them $2,000, if I can say, I can rent that sofa for £60, let's just say, it's a really good way to engage. And then if you from what our sort of our retargeting ads, it seems to be working well and converting. Obviously, we need to look at the data month over month, but yeah, we feel that it'll increase. We've had to, due to the FCA approval, we haven't been able to push hard on it. So we will continue to increase that moving into the new year.
Very cool. I'd love to I always find it interesting to talk through pricing strategies. How do you figure out how to price these items?
So look, we started out with an idea of what we consider ourselves sort of, our average target audience, right? And what we would want to do. There's obviously a number that we need to hit financially from our side. So we figured if we could meet somewhere there or thereabouts, it's a good starting point, and we can then iterate from there. What we found was actually in demographics, people were engaging a little bit more with pricing than others. So we've sort of centered that down the middle, and we're consistently learning on it. The problem that we do have without buying the furniture up front is we need obviously a certain payback to the supplier. That means that if you rent for 3 months or if you rent for 18 months, the price is going to be slightly different versus on what you have. So these are things, that ultimately over time we need to work on. But from what we've seen, if somebody wants to rent for 3 months, it's generally somebody who's doing a home staging job, for instance. Somebody who's renting for 12 months or longer, it's normally, a direct to consumer case, in which case they're happy to pay a little bit less. So the pricing side, we're still working through a lot. We've sort of gone with what we feel is best, and we're going to reiterate from there and see where that magic line is. It's really tricky with pricing, right? Because, it's a tricky one to nail from the outset. You're going to have to reiterate a few times and hopefully, get to a good spot.
Yeah, I'm sure consumers do math in their head of like, I could buy, how much could I, because I'm assuming you don't tell them the full price for the item if they wanted to buy it outright, right?
No. Well, so that's actually a good point. So we do have a buyout price on the website. The buyout price, however, is more expensive than if you just went to one of the suppliers and bought it from them. The reason for that is obviously, look, we're looking for rental. But what we do is if, for instance, you pick the item and you rented it for 12 months, all of those rental payments would go towards ownership if you wanted to buy it. So at the end of your rental period, if you said, oh, well, actually, I really like the sofa, can we use the, £300 towards the sofa? Of course you could. So we try and negate it like that. The suppliers that we do use, they generally are trade suppliers. So your average consumer wouldn't be able to just sort of go on and view the pricing. But yeah, we did want to make sure that one of the barriers to entry with the whole furniture rental thing is, am I just throwing money down the drain? How is this rental? So by overcoming that, we wanted to say, look, all of your rental payments can go towards ownership if ownership is your ultimate goal. If convenience is your goal, this is fantastic. We're offer this solution. But, if you're concerned that, well, actually, wouldn't it be better if I just bought a sofa? Well, actually, you could rent it. And if you don't like it in 3 months, swap it out, change it. We're happy to do all those things.
Have you thought about expanding into different, like maybe offering a design service or into renting other things like decor items? Can you kind of talk about either how you stay focused and why, or how you think about expanding what you offer?
We've partnered with a company called Loft, and they offer really good coverage across the UK. It's part of our expansion plans. And a large part of what they do is that accessory side. So at the moment, we focus very much on the bigger goods, right? Sofas, coffee tables. But they focus a lot on bed linen, cushions, plates, knives, forks. And with this partnership, one of the areas that we will move into a little bit more is the home staging side. We have a lot of people who come to us and who rent items for 3 months, as I mentioned, but it would be a lot more efficient and financially, beneficial if we offered that staging service as well. So going into next year, it's definitely an area that we'll have. The benefit as well of what we have is we have a whole bunch of furniture coming back in, right? So we know what's there. We have it anyway. It definitely feels like a good fit and the right fit. We've needed to get to this point, and it would have been silly if you'd asked me 6 months ago. But we definitely get into to a good point where I think it's time to launch this side. And then further on your question, we think a lot about electronics because we get asked about it an awful lot. It's something that we still need to, I think we need to mull it over a little bit more, because the problem with renting electronics direct to consumer, at least long term, is we are legally liable for those items. And then we would need to get them PAT tested, like electronically tested every year. How do we do that in front of the consumer? How does that look if something goes wrong? So it's something we will look into, but I think for now we've probably got enough on our plates, at least for the first half of next year, and sort of revisit it later on.
Yeah, I could see the challenges with electronics. I think their shelf life. I mean, if you think about like a TV, people want the latest, greatest TV every couple of years. And so then you have a warehouse full of outdated TVs no one wants potentially. Like that could be a hard thing to juggle.
Exactly right. And things like coffee tables, yes, styles change slightly, but a coffee table is a coffee table, right? And also, if people are renting it, again, one of the things that we found is, if people are renting an item and they come on, it might not be that exact sofa they wanted, but if it's near enough, i.e., if you wanted a nice, I don't know, gray sofa and you came on and it wasn't the exact style, but it was close enough, generally people are happy to go with that. And I think that's the nice thing, right? It becomes a little bit, if I was going to go and spend £4,000 on a sofa, I would make sure it was the exact one I wanted, would probably visit the store 3 times. Like, it would be a much bigger decision than if it's rented, it's all right, as long as it does the job.
Yeah, I love that. I also think buying furniture is super overwhelming. There's so many different websites, store. I mean, I hate like big box store. Like walking into a giant furniture store is just feels gross. And so you've kind of done the refinement and the vetting of this furniture ahead of time. So it almost makes it more manageable for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing is we sort of a design-led website in that fact is we do give a lot of choice. And the reason why we give in a lot, and I mean, you can go onto the website, there's tons of choice there. The reason why we are giving so much choice is because we're learning a lot, right? We're still so early that we don't know exactly what people want. Yes, we work with designers and they say this is in trend, but we want to give people the choice and we want to see, okay, who is our target audience and what are they really clicking on? What are they? And as we grow, throughout next year and the year after, we will slowly refine what our offering is until we get to a point that we're really happy. But as you know, styles change consistently. So it's letting people lead on that design. The nice thing as well with the model is because we're not going out and buying, 300 sofas up front, we can be a little bit more flexible about what we offer, right? Because if so-and-so comes on and, buys a blue sofa, it's not the end of the world because we know if we can remarket that sofa 2 months before it comes back, we guarantee to get it back out. So we feel this way into the market is probably a bit safer on a couple of levels.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I would love to talk to you about your funding rounds and what you're learning through those journeys. So you mentioned you did a pre-seed round and then likely doing...
This is all sort of part of the pre-seed. So back in December last year, December 2021, we had built a business plan. We took it out to the market and we raised 150,000. But it was part of what we still are calling this pre-seed round, which we actually just got signed off yesterday. And as part of this pre-seed round, we needed to get FCA approval within this within this money, but we also needed to prove the traction. So from sort of the way that the years sort of panned out is January, we went to work. We actually built a marketplace. We got all the suppliers on board. We got sort of, I guess, everything working as it should. We launched in March. We ran for 3 months to prove concept on a deep level, right? We did over 150 customers. We generated about 2x what we said we would on the business plan in revenue. So we felt like we were in a really good place. But what we always knew in the back of our minds is we had to get this FCA approval. And the reason why we didn't want to close the pre-seed round out before we had the FCA approval is we could improve our valuation significantly once we had the FCA approval. So we then went to work. It took a lot longer. I mean, like everything always does. It took a lot longer than what we hoped. But then, about 5.5, 6 months, we got the FCA approval. We then launched back out, direct to consumer as mentioned. Things are going well again. And we've now gone out. We had spoken to Angels sort of all the way last year, and we've kept them along for this journey. So it's only fair now that we close out with them. And then the plan is to raise our seed round, hopefully middle of next year. But we've got some strong targets on the revenue to achieve first.
Can you talk about, I talked to a lot of early stage founders Any advice you have for them for how they approach this early fundraising phase, like what to look for in these early investors, pitfalls to avoid?
One of the stories I have. We went in this thing called AIN. You probably know it. It's Angel Investment Network. Anyway, we went out on there. It was fantastic. This guy from Thailand reached out, said he loved the idea, wanted to invest the whole thing. Anyway, I put a lot of time into this, back and forth with questions, went through like this due diligence process. I was absolutely hooked. I thought he was going to, provide us all the money. Anyway, just before he sent the money, he asked us to send him a lot of money. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. And he was like, no, well, it's the fees for this and fees for that. And I was like, look, I'm not transferring any, you can take your money, the fees, which is fair enough, investments to happen. You can take your fees, but only once we get the money. Anyway, he never really got back to that and found out it was a bit of a scam. So keep your eyes out for anything that seems too good to be true. Generally turns out to be. That was it. And then I think one of the things that we found, and I mean, look, I know probably every person says it from a founding side, is don't take the no's to heart. We had an absolute ton of no's. Too early, not the right fit, not the right size. I mean, it just happens. And then the more you knock on doors, you will find a few people that are interested and spend time with them, right? What we found as well from an angel side, we've had the luxury of this being drawn out over a year. So we've had time to build, fundamentally strong relationships with angels. But try and engage with people, not just when you need money. Try and hopefully have conversations with people who like the idea, and you can keep them updated for a few months. Or, meeting somebody and asking them for money straight off the bat is never an easy thing. So try and build those relationships. I mean, I've got there's 7 or 8 VC funds that I'm updating on a monthly basis, just to try and make them feel like they're part of some journey, so that when I go back knocking on doors, middle of next year, there's some sort of relationship there, and it's not just cold off the bat. Hey, look, I'm trying to raise £1 million. I guess those are hopefully some words of wisdom, and also some things to look out for.
That's such great advice. I think, don't you have a sales background? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So
I can see that coming through, because same thing with selling. You don't want to, just cold call people and ask them to buy right away. You need to build that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it's been critical. And we've also had, one of the angels introduced us to another one of the angels who's actually going to be part of the board and a financial advisor type way. So, those relationships are important. And then also as well, along the way, you're going to get a bunch of people who are like, look, you're too early. Loads of people are going to say this to you. If somebody says it, from my understanding, is just dig a little deeper and find out, look, is it too early, or is it that we're not a good fit? Because too early is quite an easy excuse to give. Try and understand that, look, it's too early, but we really like the idea, or look, it's too early and I just can't be bothered to tell you that. You're not a great fit for the fund. So, and then, the no's are going to come thick and fast. From a sales background, I'm sort of used to them. So it's like water off the duck's back at the moment. But if you just keep on pushing, it'll come.
It probably serves you really well. I imagine having that sales background as a founder, because if you come from a product or engineering side, it's probably a little bit more challenging to hear those no's.
Yeah, of course. And from the outset, so I was at a startup previously, and, they've gone on, they raised 230 million from Goldman Sachs last year. So they've done extremely well. Throughout their process, I've always wanted to go on this fundraising journey. I was close to the CEO, but I was never part of inside those investment chats. And I thought it would be tricky, in the back of my head, I was like, I'm sure it would be tricky, but you'd get there. I'm not going to lie. It's been one of the trickiest things I've probably ever done. An awful lot of rejection, an awful lot of unnecessary, negativity on the business idea or plan. But you've just got to keep on pushing, right? If you believe in it, you're closer to the numbers. You can see it. If it really does work, and you need to have honest conversations with yourself, right? Because sometimes I think we like to justify things in our head, like, oh no, but it'll be okay. If you really fully believe in it and the numbers really make sense, then keep on pushing.
Do you have plans for where you'll invest more once you do raise your seed round?
Everywhere. So look, operations and logistically, we need to spend some time. Obviously, marketing and those things will increase spend, but logistics for us. So we've excitingly just signed a lease of a 3,000 square foot warehouse not far from our house, and we've got a van now. So as part of that, we need to understand exactly, like, the logistics are fine, but we need to really double down on it and make sure that this is nailed, because it's fine small scale, but when you really start to scale up, right, and you start getting 30, 40 orders a week, logistics becomes an absolute nightmare. So our next crucial hire will be a head of operations type role, and who can come in and really help us on that front, because myself or my co-founder don't have an operational background. So yeah, that'll be a big focus for us early part of next year.
That's great. How big is your team now?
So we're currently 4. So small team still.
Love it.
Small team, but again, and one of the other things I found out, and it was actually part of early advice we got from one of our angels. So we raised the money, wanted to go out and hire a marketing person. Was the first thing we wanted to do. And he was like, wait. Like, just you can get an agency to run a little bit of marketing. They're probably going to be better anyway, because they can do your creative. They can do this. Otherwise, you got to hire a small team of people. And it's probably the best advice I've probably got, right? Because if we had gone and hired that person, it wouldn't have gone well, because we need to get FCA approval. So I think go slow, make the case for each hire, and really test it, right? When you're a founder, you're going to be doing that role before the person who comes in is going to be doing it. And does this really, really make sense to make the hire, especially in the early days? It's different when you raise, $1 million or $2 million, because then there's a little bit of leeway if you make a bad hire. But in the early days, a bad hire can, make or break pretty quickly.
Oh, it's such good advice. I mean, I love being scrappy, and you can scale up and down agencies. You can't scale up and down a full-time employee. So
yeah, exactly. Easily. And the problem is as well, marketing, I don't know how it used to be, but like these days you have 7 different people doing all completely different roles within one team. It's mind-boggling almost.
It's hard to find jack of all trades marketers who can do the digital side, also the design, content, creative. Yeah, I totally get that. I'm a marketer, so I feel that pain. Yeah, I like to have a lot of different resources that I can leverage when I need them versus So
exactly,
really smart.
Yeah, and we've managed to get a really good agency on board now. We're really pleased with them, and we actually think, instead of bringing marketing in-house, we think we'll scale with them for a little longer. I think at some point it makes sense to bring it in-house. But I think when you're small, they've got all the expertise sort of in-house, right? And it costs you, give or take, there or thereabouts, the same of hiring a person. So at least for us, an agency was the right call.
Okay. I know we've spent a lot of time here, so I always love to end on one final question, which is, what do you think is in store for the future of the sharing economy? Like, what trends are you kind of, what do you have on your radar? What do you think the next couple of years will hold?
Of course. Yeah. Great question. We had a phone call from a news company called the Daily Mail, pretty randomly reached out to us yesterday to talk to us about the sharing economy, and more specifically, furniture sharing. I think this last year has been a very big year around fashion and fashion circularity, and bringing sustainability into the fashion sector. And I think that trend is going to continue, but I think it's going to continue into all consumer goods moving into next year and the year after. I think furniture is obviously, it's a major one, right? The thing with furniture is things last really long. Like a wooden table doesn't just fall apart. I mean, I've got a sofa that I've had for 10 years. I've got a wooden table that I've had for at least 12 years. So these things last really long and really well. And I think that the more we get into this, the more it will become a really mainstream idea. I think as well that will also bring all the really nice things that come with it, right? I think that the pricing will drop dramatically, right? I think that our pricing, once our suppliers are really happy and confident that actually these items are lasting and consumers are paying, I think it has the benefits all around. So I'm really bullish on the circular economy. I think this year started off things nicely, but I think it will continue to spike well into next year and the year after for sure.
Yeah, I think with, I've talked to several, founders who have rental businesses, and just the impact, the environmental impact, being able to lead out with that mission. And it really resonates, certainly with younger generation. I mean, all generations, right? I think are really trying to be more aware of their consumption. And so it's really cool when you can have an effective business model that also is doing good for the world. So,
and yeah, I mean, look, fingers crossed, right? I know that, the States have got some models working extremely well. I think that we can replicate this model quite easily across major markets in Europe. So yeah, we're excited, and, fingers crossed it works out.
Well, awesome. Well, Bradley, I have learned a ton from you today. I really appreciate you being here. Best of luck as you scale Homebound. I think you've shared some great insights. So really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much, and have a great day.
This podcast was brought to you by Every. We work with gig companies, marketplaces, delivery businesses, and more to pay their workers fast. You can learn more at every.com.